You know that feeling when you step outside early in the morning, the sun's just rising, birds are arguing about breakfast, and the smell of fresh-cut grass hits you like a memory from childhood? Yeah, that was my life every weekend. I loved my lawn. I mean, really loved it. It wasn't just grass to me, it was therapy. Some people go to the gym or do yoga. Me? I mowed. That was my zen time. Just me, my mower, and that smooth hum rolling across the yard like a tiny green symphony. I used to joke that if there was a Lawns Anonymous group, I'd probably be their president. My friends laughed, but honestly, I took pride in that yard. It was perfect, the kind of green you see in golf commercials. Every blade of grass stood in line like soldiers. No weeds. No patches. Just smooth, soft, living carpet. Our house sat on a quiet suburban street, one of those cookie-cutter paradise neighborhoods. Every driveway had 2 cars, every mailbox looked the same, and every house came with an unspoken rule: keep it perfect or face the wrath of the HOA. Ah yes, the Homeowners Association. The mysterious neighborhood overlords. At first, I didn't think much about them. You know, just a group of folks who liked rules a little too much. They'd send out newsletters about community harmony and preserving property values, which sounded fancy but really just meant don't mess up the vibe. We moved in thinking we were joining a friendly, tight-knit community. Neighbors waved, lawns were trimmed, and there was always someone walking their golden retriever at 6 a.m. It all felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. That's how it always starts, right? Back then, I was the model homeowner. I paid my dues on time. I smiled at board members when I saw them at the mailbox. I even helped old Mr. Simmons move his trash bins one day when it was windy. In short, I was a good citizen of suburbia. And that lawn? It became my pride and joy. I had the best-looking yard on the block. The HOA even sent me a Yard of the Month certificate once, laminated and everything. I framed it and hung it in the garage like it was an Oscar. Every weekend, you'd see me out there, straw hat on, water bottle by my side, mowing in perfect stripes. I'd even edged the sidewalk twice, because one pass wasn't enough for my standards. My wife said I was obsessed. I said I was dedicated. There's a difference. Life was simple. Peaceful. Predictable. Then came the drought. That's when things started to get weird. See, Mother Nature decided to turn our town into a baking tray. The grass started browning faster than toast. Everyone's lawns went from emerald green to crispy beige overnight. Water restrictions kicked in, and suddenly, watering your lawn became a crime punishable by dirty looks and HOA emails. I tried everything: watering early mornings, using drought-tolerant seeds, even whispering words of encouragement to the dying blades. Nothing worked. And then the letters started coming. Dear homeowner, your lawn does not meet the community's aesthetic standards. Please address the discoloration within 14 days to avoid penalties. Discoloration? Lady, my grass isn't discolored, it's dead. At first, I laughed it off. I figured it was just some overzealous HOA volunteer with too much free time. But the letters kept coming, each one more aggressive than the last. Then they started adding fines. Real money. I remember standing there one evening, hose in hand, staring at the sad patch of grass that used to be my pride. The sunset was hitting it just right, and I swear I could almost hear the tiny violins playing. My once beautiful lawn, my sanctuary, was now the HOA's biggest crime scene. But here's the funny thing, even with all that going on, I still tried to stay positive. I told myself, it's just grass. They'll calm down once the rain comes. Spoiler alert, they did not calm down. Instead, things escalated faster than a toddler with a sugar rush. Complaints turned into warnings, warnings turned into threats, and before I knew it, I was neck-deep in HOA drama I never saw coming. You ever have that gut feeling that something small is about to explode into something huge? That was me, standing in my yard, barefoot on brittle grass, watching an HOA board member snap a photo of my lawn like it was a crime scene. And that's when I realized this wasn't about grass anymore. This was about control. I didn't know it at the time, But the war between me and the HOA was just getting started. And before it was over, they'd do something I never imagined possible. They'd call the police on me. But that is a story for the next chapter. It all started with a simple white envelope. No warning, no phone call, just one of those thin, official-looking letters sitting in my mailbox, staring up at me like bad news wrapped in paper. The return address said Homeowners Association. My first thought was, oh great, another newsletter about recycling bins or lawn edging. But no, this one felt different. I opened it right there by the curb, next to the trash cans. Big mistake. The first line hit harder than my lawn mower blade on a rock. Dear homeowner, your property is in violation of community landscaping standards. I blinked a few times. Violation? Me? I read it again, just to make sure it wasn't some prank. Nope. It was real. Apparently, my beautiful, lush, perfectly maintained lawn, the one I had nurtured for years, was now illegal. Their reasoning? Excessive water use during drought restrictions. I stood there, trying to process it. Wait, so now green grass was the problem? The same HOA that handed me a Yard of the Month award just last year was now accusing me of being the neighborhood's biggest water criminal. The letter went on. Immediate correction is required. Failure to comply may result in daily fines of up to $250. I swear, I had to laugh just to stop myself from losing it. They were fining me for being too green. Like really? This was the same HOA that had once sent a memo praising aesthetic excellence and community pride. Now they were saying my lawn was a menace to society. I walked back inside, letter in hand, and told my wife. She thought I was joking. No, really, I said. They want me to remove the lawn. They said it uses too much water. She looked at me like I'd just told her the sky got fined for being too blue. We both laughed at first, because honestly, what else do you do? But after a minute, it stopped being funny. Because I realized they were serious. And not just a little serious HOA serious. The kind of serious where they start quoting bylaws and sending photos as evidence. Later that afternoon, I went outside and just stood on my lawn, reading that letter again while the sprinklers clicked in the background. The sun was warm, the grass looked amazing, soft, thick, vibrant. The kind of yard that makes neighbors jealous. And here I was, being told to rip it out. I looked around. Every other lawn on the street looked just like mine, green, well-kept, freshly watered. But somehow, I was the one in violation. Why me? That's when I noticed one of the HOA board members, we'll call her Linda, walking her dog across the street. She gave me that tight smile people give when they've already written you up. I waved. She didn't wave back. Interesting. So I went inside, pulled up my email, and sent a polite message to the HOA. Hi, I just received a notice about my lawn. I'm a bit confused, could you clarify the issue? My lawn meets all community standards, and I follow the watering schedule posted on the HOA website. I hit send, feeling confident this was all just a misunderstanding. 2 days later, I got a reply that started with, Dear resident, which already told me how this was going to go. The HOA has received reports that your property continues to use excessive water resources during the ongoing drought period. As per Section 4.7 of the Landscaping Covenant, residents are encouraged to adopt drought-friendly alternatives, such as rock gardens or xeriscaping. Encouraged, huh? More like threatened. Then they ended with, Failure to comply may result in legal enforcement. Legal enforcement. Over grass. I swear, it felt like I'd been transported into some kind of suburban dystopia where watering your yard made you a criminal. I called my neighbor, Tom, the guy across the street. He's one of those retired types who always knows what's going on before anyone else does. I asked if he'd gotten a letter. He said, Nope, mine's fine. But you know how the board is, they've been trying to push the desert landscaping thing. You might have just been the first test case. Perfect. So now I was a guinea pig in the HOA's war on grass. That night, I sat in the backyard, staring at my lawn under the patio lights, The sprinklers kicked on, hissing quietly. The air smelled like summer. Peaceful. Normal. But it didn't feel peaceful anymore. Because now every drop of water felt like evidence against me. Every blade of grass felt like a silent rebellion. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just about community standards. This was about someone trying to make an example out of me. Still, I wasn't ready to fight. Not yet. I thought I could reason with them. Work it out like adults. I had no idea that this was only the beginning. Because soon, the letters would stop being just paper. They'd start showing up in person. And the HOA? They were about to make this very personal. After that second letter, I figured it was time to stop guessing and actually talk to someone from the HOA. You know, like a normal, civilized human conversation. So I called the number listed at the bottom of the notice. The voicemail said, "Thank you for contacting the Green Hills Homeowners Association. Your call is important to us." Yeah. Sure it is. I left a polite message explaining that my lawn was perfectly within watering limits and asking if we could talk it through. 2 days later, I got an email from the HOA president herself, Linda. If you've ever dealt with someone who can sound smug through text, you already know how this email read. It started with, "Dear resident, thank you for your inquiry. The association's goal is to maintain environmental compliance while upholding community aesthetics." Community aesthetics. There it was, their favorite phrase. It's HOA code for, we decide what looks good, and you don't. I replied, keeping my cool. I wrote, "Hi Linda, appreciate the clarification. I'm just confused, several other homes still have grass lawns, and I've followed all watering schedules. Why am I being fined?" Her response? Short, clipped, and colder than a frozen lawn sprinkler. "The board is currently reviewing all cases. Yours was one of the first identified for non-compliance. We appreciate your patience during this transition period." Translation, you're the guinea pig. I sat there staring at the screen, half expecting a hidden camera to pop out. Because this was ridiculous. I wasn't overwatering. I wasn't wasting water. I was just maintaining what the HOA itself had once celebrated. And yet somehow, I'd been bumped from Yard of the Month to Public Enemy #1 in record time. So I asked for a meeting. They agreed a short discussion during the next HOA board session. I showed up that Thursday evening, a folder of photos and water bills in hand, ready to prove my innocence. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, the same place where they host bake sales and Christmas parties. Only this time, it felt less like a neighborhood gathering and more like a courtroom. Linda sat at the front with 2 other board members, both flipping through papers like they were Supreme Court justices. I took a seat. "Ah, Mr. Last name," Linda said, smiling that polite, tight-lipped HOA smile. "We appreciate your attendance. Now, regarding your lawn." I nodded. "Yeah, about that, I'm really confused. My water usage is within city limits. I follow the schedule. I even shut off sprinklers 2 days a week. So I'm not sure what the issue is." She leaned back, clasping her hands like a CEO about to fire someone. "Well," she began, "the HOA has made a commitment to environmental responsibility. Green lawns during drought restrictions create the wrong image for our community. We're encouraging residents to explore sustainable alternatives." I blinked. "But others still have lawns. I can show you pictures from this week. Mine isn't any greener than theirs." One of the board members, a guy with a clipboard and zero personality, chimed in, "We're in the process of reviewing all properties." "Right," I said, "but meanwhile, you find me. Doesn't seem very consistent, does it?" Linda gave that tight smile again. "Well, Mr. Last name, we can't address every property simultaneously. We started with the most visible lawns, the ones along the main road." I glanced at the guy next to her. He wouldn't even look up. "So basically," I said, "I'm being fined because my house is easy to see?" Silence. It was the kind of silence that says, "You're not wrong, but we'll never admit it." I tried to stay calm, but the tone, that fake, corporate politeness, was infuriating. "I just don't understand," I said finally. "Last year you gave me an award for this exact lawn. Now it's a violation. What changed?" Linda adjusted her papers, not even looking at me. "Environmental policies evolve, Mr. Last name. Homeowners are expected to adapt." That word "expected" hung in the air like a warning. Expected to adapt. Expected to comply. Expected to nod and smile while they rewrote the rules. I left the meeting more frustrated than when I arrived. As I walked out, I heard one of the board members whisper, "He's the guy who complained about the mailbox fees last year." Ah. There it was. The real reason. See, a few months back, I'd questioned a random $40 mailbox maintenance fee they added to everyone's dues. I didn't think much of it at the time, but apparently, questioning authority doesn't go unnoticed in HOA land. So this wasn't just about grass. This was personal. That night, I told my wife what happened. She just shook her head and said, "They're trying to make an example out of you." I laughed, but she wasn't wrong. The HOA didn't want cooperation, they wanted submission. And as I looked out at my beautiful, perfectly green lawn shining under the porch light, I made a quiet promise to myself. If they wanted a fight, they picked the wrong homeowner. Because I wasn't about to let a group of clipboard warriors bully me into tearing up something I worked so hard for. Not a chance. You know how sometimes you think things can't possibly get worse, and then life looks at you and says, "Challenge accepted"? Yeah. That was me, standing on my front lawn with a new letter from the HOA in my hand. This one wasn't a warning. It was a bill. Notice of fine, $50 per day for continued non-compliance. $50. Per day. For grass. I stared at the paper, half expecting Ashton Kutcher to jump out of a bush yelling, "You're unpunked." But nope, this was very real, and it was signed by Linda, HOA president. Of course. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I might have screamed. I walked back inside and showed my wife. She looked at it, then at me, then back at it. "So, that's $1,500 a month," she said. "Apparently," I muttered. "Guess I'm the proud owner of the world's most expensive lawn." At first, I tried to brush it off. I figured if I just stayed calm and kept documenting everything, it'd blow over. So that's what I did. Every email, every letter, every ridiculous fine, I saved it all. I started a folder on my computer called HOA Chronicles, because if I was going down, I was at least going to make it organized. I took photos of the lawn every day, morning, noon, and night. I even timestamped them. You'd think I was building a legal case for a missing person, not a patch of grass. But then the fines doubled. No warning, no explanation, just another letter. Due to continued non-compliance, your daily fine has increased to $100. $100. Per day. It was like they were trying to financially suffocate me into submission. I emailed Linda again. "Hi, I'm still confused about these fines. I've made no changes since the last inspection. Can we discuss this before escalating?" Her response? "The board's decision is final until corrective action is taken. Please remit payment to avoid legal escalation." Legal escalation. Over grass. I swear, if you'd told me a year earlier that I'd be facing legal threats from my HOA for watering my yard, I would have laughed you off my porch. But here I was, living proof that suburban drama can turn into warfare real fast. Then the whispers started. You could feel it in the neighborhood, the way people started looking at you a little longer when they drove by. The couple across the street, who used to wave every morning, suddenly stopped making eye contact. Another neighbor, the one who always borrowed my ladder, quietly returned it and hasn't spoken to me since. It wasn't everyone, though. A few folks were still friendly, just quietly. One night, my next-door neighbor, Rachel, walked over when no one was watching. She said, "Hey, I heard what's going on." For what it's worth, your lawn looks great. This is ridiculous. I smiled, but she kept her voice low, like we were discussing state secrets. Don't tell them I said that, she whispered. They're watching everything lately. They're watching everything. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just about me. Everyone else was scared too. The HOA had turned the whole neighborhood into some kind of silent compliance zone. Nobody wanted to be next. Meanwhile, the fines kept adding up. $100 a day. 7 days a week. Do the math, that's $3,000 a month. Just for existing. We started feeling it, too. Every time I paid the mortgage, I could see that notice of outstanding balance from the HOA glaring at me like a threat letter. My wife and I talked about it every night at dinner. She'd say, maybe we should just switch to rocks like they want. And I'd stare out the window at that beautiful lawn, the same one that used to make me proud, and feel this mix of anger and sadness. Because it wasn't just a lawn anymore. It was a symbol of stubbornness, pride, and, apparently, bankruptcy. Every blade of grass suddenly felt like it cost me a fortune. It was surreal. The same neighbors who once complimented my yard now avoided the topic completely. One even joked, "Man, that's some expensive fertilizer you're using." I laughed along, but inside, I felt trapped. The HOA wasn't backing down. Every notice was colder than the last, written in that perfect mix of legal jargon and fake politeness. Failure to comply will result in lien proceedings. A lien. On my home. That's when it stopped being funny. I wasn't just fighting for a patch of grass anymore, I was fighting for my home, my sanity, and a little bit of freedom from this ridiculous suburban dictatorship. So I did what any reasonable person would do when cornered by bureaucracy. I started preparing for war. I began gathering evidence, researching HOA laws, and talking to people who'd fought similar battles. I wasn't sure where this was headed yet, but one thing was clear, they'd pushed me too far to just give up. And as I sat on my porch that night, the sprinklers ticking in the distance like defiant little soldiers, I thought to myself, they want to make me an example? Fine. But it won't be the example they were expecting. At some point, you stop feeling like a victim and start feeling like a detective. That's where I was, sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by letters, photos, and a growing pile of HOA nonsense. The fines had stacked up, the threats were getting louder, and the peace I once felt in this house had evaporated faster than my sprinkler water in July. I was done being confused. It was time to understand exactly what I was up against. So I opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and typed 4 words that would change everything. HOA drought fines illegal? What came up next was like opening Pandora's inbox. I found entire forums, thousands of homeowners just like me, all telling horror stories about power-hungry HOAs who'd overstepped their authority. There were threads with titles like "HOA won't let me save water" and "They fined me for Xeriscaping." Xeriscaping, that was a new word for me. Basically, it's landscaping that uses little or no water. Rocks, native plants, desert gardens, the stuff you see in eco-friendly homes. And then I stumbled on something that made me sit up straighter, a news article about state drought protection laws. Apparently, a few years back, the state had passed a law preventing HOAs from punishing homeowners for replacing grass with drought-resistant alternatives. It was part of a statewide water conservation effort. Translation? The HOA couldn't legally force me to keep grass, or punish me for trying to save water. That's when it hit me, they weren't enforcing environmental policy. They were just enforcing control. I started digging deeper. I found PDFs of HOA policy handbooks, scanned through city ordinances, and even read through sections of the California Civil Code, which, by the way, is like reading a bedtime story written by robots. But buried in that legal maze, there it was, black and white. A homeowners association shall not prohibit or impose a fine or assessment against a homeowner for reducing or eliminating natural grass in favor of water-efficient landscaping. I stared at the screen, half laughing, half furious. So let me get this straight, the HOA was threatening legal action while breaking the law themselves. That's when something inside me shifted. Up until that moment, I'd been reacting, stressed, defensive, constantly on edge. But now I had knowledge. And knowledge, as they say, is power, especially when dealing with people who think they're untouchable. I printed out the law, highlighted the key sections, added sticky notes. My desk looked like the command center for a small legal rebellion. Then I went back to those homeowner forums. I started messaging people, reading their strategies, learning how they'd fought back and won. Turns out, there's an entire underground network of people who have declared war on HOAs. They call themselves things like Covenant Defenders and HOA Survivors Anonymous. One guy wrote, "Remember, HOAs operate on fear. Once you know your rights, they lose their power." That line hit me hard. Because that's exactly how it felt, like the HOA had built this entire system designed to intimidate you into obedience. But now I wasn't intimidated. I was focused. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm, almost excited. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to do it smart. That night, I sat outside under the porch light, laptop on my knees, and thought about my next move. The yard stretched out in front of me, perfectly green and glowing in the moonlight. And for the first time, I didn't see grass. I saw opportunity. If they wanted to fine me for being too green, fine, I'd take their words literally. I'd go the other way. I'd give them the most drought-friendly yard in the entire neighborhood. No grass. No water. Just rock. Desert rock. And not some messy pile of gravel, either. I'd make it look beautiful, modern, clean, sustainable. The kind of yard you'd see in a luxury desert home magazine. Something that would make the HOA furious because it followed the law perfectly. The thought made me grin. It was poetic justice, really. They wanted control. I was going to give them compliance, but on my terms. Before heading to bed, I looked over at the binder full of letters and printouts. It wasn't just paperwork anymore, it was ammo. And as I turned off the porch light, I said to myself, they started this with a letter. I'll finish it with the law. When I decided to fight back, I wanted two things: do it legally, and make them regret ever underestimating me. Not with anger, with style. So I made a plan. A beautiful, sun-baked, zero-water plan. Desert rock. Xeriscape. Call it whatever you want, I called it poetic compliance. First rule, don't give them an inch of procedural ammo. If they were going to play by bylaws and permits, then fine, I would too. I printed out the state statute I'd found, the HOA covenant, and every email I'd exchanged with Linda. Then I created a checklist: permits, city rules, irrigation cutoff dates, plant lists, and a timeline. Everything logged. Everything saved. Every single step. I copied the HOA on every email. If they wanted to act like bureaucrats, I'd make sure they were included in the guest list. Next, the look. I didn't want a slap-together gravel dump, I wanted something that said, clean, modern, intentional. I sketched it out: wide flagstone pathways, beds of smooth river rock, clusters of native succulents, a sculptural agave as the centerpiece, low-voltage solar lights lining the walkway, and a crown jewel, a small dry riverbed of white stones that would curve like a lazy creek through the front yard. Add a few boulders for drama, a drip irrigation system for the natives, and boom, drought-proof and magazine-ready. Budget? I'm not stupid. I priced everything out: gravel by the ton, succulents in bulk, a handful of boulders, solar lights, drip lines, and a crew for demo and installation. I set aside a number that made my stomach do a little flip, then doubled it because landscaping always surprises you. I wrote it down neat in my notebook like it was a battle plan. Then came logistics. I scheduled the demo for a weekday when traffic was light. I hired a small local crew who actually cared about design and not just shovels. I bought heavy-duty mulch fabric to stop weeds, and a sifter for the soil so the rocks would lay flat and look intentional. For the plants, I picked natives that would thrive on rainfall and occasional drip: yuccas, penstemon, desert marigolds, and a few tough little barrel cacti that look tough but are surprisingly photogenic. Every step I took, I documented. Photos before. Photos during. Photos after. Timestamped, geotagged when possible. Every receipt scanned and put in a folder for my future self and for any nosy board member who thought they could intimidate me with fines. I emailed the permit office, confirmed the permit requirements, and attached copies of everything to an email address to the HOA with the subject line, Plan Landscape Conversion, Compliance Documents attached. I hit send, leaned back, and felt this small, wicked thrill. They'd get to watch the whole thing in real time. There was a script to the rollout, too. Demo day, noisy but efficient. Day 2, soil prep and weed barrier. Day 3, rock and pathway installation. Day 4, plantings and drip system. Final day, cleanup, lights, and a little reveal photo set for the neighborhood. I told the crew to keep things tidy and tasteful, no chaos, no dump trucks blocking the street for weeks. If you're going to make a statement, do it like you mean it. I also prepared the messaging. To the HOA, polite, factual, and legally grounded. Per state water efficiency statutes and municipal code, I wrote, I am converting my front yard to drought-tolerant landscaping. Permit is attached, work will commence on, date. To neighbors, a friendly flyer slipped under doors the night before demo, going green the dry way. Any questions, come over for coffee. Tone, disarming. Purpose, neighborly diplomacy. I wanted allies, not enemies. On the morning the machines arrived, I stood at the curb and watched as my perfect little green carpet morphed into a blank canvas. There was something surprisingly cleansing about tearing up grass you'd fought over with sprinklers and weeds for years. Each shovelful felt like breaking a chain. By sunset, the first layer of rock was down, and the outline of my design was visible: clean lines, contrast, and texture. The crew left the site tidy, the lights were stacked like little promises on the porch. I emailed the HOA again, CCANG the city planner, work is underway. Documents attached. Happy to discuss. They replied with a canned message about reviewing citizens' projects. I smiled. Let them review. By the time they finished, the yard would be done legal, beautiful, and totally compliant with the law they claimed to enforce. There was a delicious poetry in it. They wanted the lawn gone? Fine. They'd get a landscape they couldn't fine me for, and that would keep its dignity while costing them the moral authority they'd been brandishing like a badge. That night, I sat on the porch with a beer, watching the moonlight catch the white stones like a river of stars. The house looked different already, modern, confident, unbothered. I felt the kind of quiet satisfaction you only get from doing something smart and a little bit defiant. You want the lawn gone? I murmured to myself, grinning. You'll get something you'll never forget. And this time, the memory would belong to me. It took about 3 weeks, 3 long, dusty, sunburned weeks, but the transformation was nothing short of magic. What used to be a sea of needy green grass had turned into something out of an Arizona postcard. Smooth river rocks, clean lines, bold plants, it was a little slice of desert paradise sitting right in the middle of a suburban HOA kingdom. And you know what? It looked good. Like, really good. Every morning, I'd grab my coffee, step outside, and just admire it. The way the early light hit the white stones made the whole yard glow like it had its own spotlight. The agave in the center stood proud like a spiky green crown, and the solar lights along the pathway kicked in at dusk, giving everything this soft golden shimmer. It wasn't just me who noticed. The first week after everything was finished, people started slowing down when they drove past. I saw neighbors I'd never talked to before stopping in front of my house, pointing, nodding, even taking photos. Some would wave or give me a thumbs up. One guy on his morning jog actually said, "Dude, this looks awesome, way better than grass." Even the neighborhood kids seemed fascinated. They'd walk their dogs right up to the edge and whisper things like, "Whoa, it's all rocks," like they were staring at a museum exhibit. I couldn't help but laugh. Yeah, it was different, but different was the point. But the real entertainment? That came from the HOA board. Oh, they noticed. They noticed a lot. I saw them. Multiple times. The president, Linda, drove by in her little silver SUV, real slow, like she was doing some kind of surveillance mission. A few days later, another board member parked across the street to make a phone call. And another day, a different one walked his dog back and forth 3 times, pretending to check his mailbox each time. It was like watching undercover agents who forgot they were wearing name tags. You could see the irritation in their faces. They couldn't say anything, but you just knew they wanted to. They had that look, the tight lips, the squinting eyes, the kind of face that says, "This person found a loophole and I hate it." So I decided to give them something to read. Right near the front of my yard, tucked tastefully beside the dry riverbed, I planted a small wooden sign, nothing flashy, just clean white letters on black. 100% drought compliant, HOA approved. That's right. The same HOA that fined me for having too much green was now being credited right in front of everyone who passed by. Poetic justice, printed in bold. The next morning, I sat out on my porch swing, coffee in hand, pretending to read the paper as Linda's SUV rolled by again. She slowed down, eyes locked on the sign, lips moving silently as she read it. Then she sped off, probably to fire off an email with urgent in the subject line. I couldn't help but laugh. Loudly. The irony was perfect. I'd done everything by the book. Every permit, every compliance note, every legal protection was in place. They couldn't fine me. They couldn't threaten me. They couldn't even demand changes without contradicting their own policies. And the best part? The neighborhood actually looked better. The rocks sparkled, the plants bloomed, and my water bill dropped to practically nothing. I had created something modern, responsible, and undeniably beautiful, and the HOA had no choice but to live with it. One of my neighbors, an older guy named Tom who'd been watching the drama unfold for weeks, came by with a grin. He said, "You know, they probably hate that it looks this good." I grinned back. That's the goal, Tom. Passive-aggressive landscaping at its finest. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely free. No more daily fines. No more angry letters. Just peace, rocks, and the sweet sound of silence from the HOA inbox. When the sun set that evening, the lights flickered on one by one, turning the yard into a calm little oasis. The breeze was warm, the sky was orange, and for a second, it felt like I'd built my own little piece of rebellion, quiet, legal, and absolutely unshakable. Cinematic moment? Oh, I had it. Camera pans out, sun setting behind my rock garden, and my voiceover cuts in with a smirk. They said my lawn violated community standards. So I gave them something even better and made them approve it. Cue the music. Victory complete. For a while, I thought the war was over. My yard looked amazing, the neighbors loved it, and the HOA had gone suspiciously quiet. Too quiet. Then one morning, I walked out to grab the mail, coffee in hand, sun on my face, and there it was again. A white envelope. The logo. The all-caps heading, "Notice of Violation." I swear I laughed out loud right there in the driveway. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," I said to nobody. I tore it open, half amused, half curious, like opening a bad sequel you didn't ask for. The letter read, in all its bureaucratic glory: "Your current landscape does not conform to the harmonious visual standards of the community. Rocks and desert materials are not consistent with neighborhood aesthetics. Please restore your lawn to grass within 30 days to avoid additional fines." I actually choked on my coffee. Restore your lawn? The same lawn they fined me for having? Oh, this was rich. So, I did what any self-respecting, rock-loving homeowner would do. I went inside, set the letter down on my desk, cracked my knuckles, and opened a fresh email draft. Subject line: Response to HOA violation, Xeriscape compliance, again. And I got to work. I attached every piece of proof I had: the city permit, the state drought statute, my correspondence with their board, and a neat little photo collage of my brand new, harmonious desert landscape. Then I started typing, nice and calm, like a lawyer who drinks chamomile tea. Dear HOA Board. Per California state law, or applicable drought regulation, homeowners are entitled to implement drought-tolerant landscaping without penalty from HOAs, provided it meets safety and structural standards. My property is 100% compliant under these guidelines, confirmed by city approval and state conservation regulations. I trust that this resolves your concern regarding aesthetic harmony. Respectfully, my name. Short, sharp, polite, and absolutely bulletproof. Then I went one step further. I filed a formal complaint with the State Housing and Community Development Department, including copies of the HOA's letters. If they wanted to play legal hardball, I'd bring the umpire. Within a week, I got a confirmation email from the state saying they'd opened an investigation into potential HOA overreach regarding drought-compliant homeowners. That was the moment I knew I'd officially turned the tables. A few days later, I noticed something funny. The HOA stopped sending letters. No more warnings. No more notices. Just silence. But not the peaceful kind, the awkward, we messed up kind. Then, one evening, Linda, the HOA president herself, drove by again. Only this time, she didn't glare. She actually gave me a tight little nod. The kind of nod that says, "You win this round." I smiled back, raised my glass of iced tea, and said quietly, "Cheers, Linda." The power shift was complete. What used to feel like intimidation now just felt small. I wasn't scared anymore. I had the law on my side, the facts in my hands, and a front yard that sparkled like rebellion under the afternoon sun. Neighbors started noticing too. A few even stopped by to ask how I pulled it off. "The HOA told us we couldn't use rocks," one woman said. I grinned and handed her a printed copy of the state Xeriscaping law. "You can," I said. "They just don't want you to know that." And that's when I realized something bigger. This wasn't just about my lawn. This was about how these HOAs use fancy language and fake authority to scare people who don't know their rights. But once you do, their power crumbles fast. A week later, the HOA sent one final message, not a violation this time, just a clarification memo to all residents. It basically said, while the HOA encourages consistent community aesthetics, homeowners are permitted to install drought-tolerant landscaping as allowed by state law. Translation: we give up. I read it, smiled, and pinned it on my fridge like a trophy. From that day on, my desert rock garden became more than a lawn alternative. It became a symbol, a quiet little reminder that rules aren't always right, and that sometimes, the best revenge is staying calm, staying factual, and staying within the law, while still driving them absolutely nuts. Voiceover cue, cinematic tone, calm confidence. They tried to find me for following the rules. So I showed them what the rules really said. And for the first time since this whole mess began, I finally felt like I was the one running the neighborhood. After the HOA's so-called clarification memo went out, things in the neighborhood started to shift, and not in the HOA's favor. At first, it was quiet. A few curious glances, a couple of whispered, "Hey, didn't they fine you for that?" moments at the mailbox. But then, one by one, people started asking real questions. My neighbor Tom, the one who joked about passive-aggressive landscaping, came over first. He held his water bill in one hand and said, "So, just to be clear, you're saving money, it's legal, and the HOA can't say anything?" I nodded. Exactly. State law protects drought-friendly yards. They just count on you not knowing that. Tom looked at his patchy lawn like it had personally betrayed him. "All right," he said, "I'm done watering this nonsense." A week later, a landscaping crew showed up at his place. Then another. And another. Suddenly, lawns were disappearing all over the block, replaced by gravel, succulents, river rocks, and creative xeriscapes that made the whole street look like a designer eco-village. It was beautiful. Different, but beautiful. And most importantly, it was ours. The HOA board? Oh, they were not thrilled. At the next community meeting, which I made sure to attend just for the show, the tension was so thick you could have laid it like sod. Half the room was excited, talking about saving money, conserving water, and following state law. The other half, mostly the board, sat there with tight smiles and twitching clipboards. Linda, our ever-serious HOA president, tried to keep order. She cleared her throat and said, "We just want to ensure consistency in neighborhood appearance." Someone from the back, a woman I'd never seen speak up before, called out, "Consistency or control, Linda?" "Because it feels like control." The room went dead quiet. I just sat there, sipping my coffee, trying not to laugh. Another guy chimed in, "We should be thanking people for doing drought landscaping. It saves everyone money." Someone else added, "Yeah, why are we fighting homeowners for following the law?" It was like watching a crack form in the wall of their authority, and once it started, there was no stopping it. After the meeting, a few people came up to me, shaking my hand. "Thanks for standing up to them," one woman said. "I didn't even know we had rights like that." I smiled. Neither did I until I got fined for watering my lawn. Before I knew it, I'd become this unintentional community spokesperson. People started emailing me questions, forwarding me their violation letters, asking for advice on how to word responses. I wasn't a lawyer, but I'd learned enough HOA language to translate it for regular people. I made a simple little folder of templates, how to respond to notices, links to the state drought law, even sample Xeriscape plans that met code. I shared them with anyone who asked. Before long, I was the unofficial HOA whisperer of the neighborhood. It wasn't just about lawns anymore, it was about power. Neighbors who had spent years afraid of the board were suddenly realizing they could push back. They started showing up to meetings, voting on changes, running for open positions. People who had never said a word before were speaking up calmly, respectfully, but with facts on their side. And you could see it, that slow, steady shift from fear to confidence. Even the board members started to soften. A few of them privately admitted that they didn't agree with how things were handled. "We just followed the old rules," one said quietly. "Maybe it's time to update them." That's when it hit me, this was bigger than my yard. It was a reminder that every time someone stands up to bad rules, it gives others permission to do the same. Soon, the whole community looked different. You'd walk down the street and see native plants blooming, solar lights twinkling, little desert gardens thriving where thirsty grass used to die in the heat. It wasn't uniform anymore, but it was alive. It had personality. It had freedom. And funny enough, the neighborhood's property values didn't drop like the HOA had warned. In fact, local agents started calling it one of the most eco-friendly developments in the area. Irony really is delicious sometimes. That night, I stood on my porch again, same spot where all this chaos started, and looked around. Where there used to be conformity, there was creativity. Where there used to be silence, there was conversation. And where there used to be fear, there was pride. Voiceover tone shifts warm and reflective, that cinematic feel of unity and quiet triumph. All it took was one letter, one lawn, and one person willing to say, "No, that's not right." And just like that, a neighborhood woke up. The HOA might have started this fight, but the community ended it. Together. Victory, I realized, sometimes comes slowly, like a sunrise over rocks you planted yourself. A few weeks after the community started embracing Xeriscaping, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a state investigator from the housing department. They'd received multiple complaints about the HOA's handling of drought-compliant landscaping. Apparently, my letters, my documentation, and a few brave neighbors' reports had created a trail they couldn't ignore. "Do you have all your paperwork?" the investigator asked. I laughed. "All of it. Organized. Chronologically. Time-stamped. Labeled HOA Chronicles." Within days, the HOA received official correspondence. The letters were polite, bureaucratic, but crystal clear. They were in violation of state environmental regulations, and fines were possible if corrective action wasn't taken. The board panicked. Emails flew back and forth, and suddenly, the big, smug authority they'd carried around like a badge felt flimsy. A few members quietly resigned, probably the ones who realized that enforcing community aesthetics at the expense of law and fairness wasn't exactly the resume builder they thought it was. Linda, the president, stayed on just long enough to help approve a revised landscaping policy. It was short, simple, and legally airtight. Homeowners may implement drought-tolerant landscaping, xeriscaping, or other water-conserving yards without penalty, provided they comply with city permits and safety standards. I read that line and laughed aloud. Months of stress, fines, and tension boiled down to one beautifully worded sentence that basically said, "You can do what you want, but try not to make us look bad." And then came the ultimate touch of irony. The HOA decided to redo their community brochure to highlight the neighborhood's eco-friendly initiatives. When I saw the draft, my jaw dropped. My desert rock yard, every sculpted stone, every succulent, every solar light was front and center on the cover. The caption read, "Green living, drought-friendly, and beautifully maintained." I couldn't have scripted it better myself. The same yard they once threatened with fines had become the shining example of the entire community. Neighbors would stop by just to see the brochure and shake their heads with a grin. "They finally got it," one woman said. "Thanks to you." It wasn't just about my yard. It was about the message it sent. Knowledge, persistence, and a little bit of clever strategy can topple even the most rigid authority. Sitting on my porch one evening, looking at the stones glowing softly under the solar lights, I realized something. I'd started this as one person fighting a bully. But in the end, the fight had transformed the entire neighborhood, forced the HOA to change, and reminded everyone that rules aren't excuses for control, they're boundaries, and they work both ways. Voiceover moment: calm, triumphant, a touch of humor. They tried to fine me, intimidate me, and make me bend. But in the end, the law, the facts, and a little desert rock showed them who really ran the yard. And for the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. The HOA had fallen, the neighborhood had risen, and my yard? Well, it had become legendary. Standing on my porch, looking out over the yard that once caused me so much stress, I started thinking about the bigger picture. Not just lawns, not just rocks, not even just HOAs, but power. How it works, how it hides in plain sight, and how even small rules can reveal enormous imbalances. A patch of grass had started this whole mess. A simple, green, healthy lawn. And yet, it turned into a battlefield because someone else decided they had the authority to dictate what I could do on my own property. That's when I realized, rules are only as good as the people who enforce them, and sometimes, they're wielded more like weapons than guidelines. The experience taught me that knowledge is everything. Knowing your rights, understanding the law, and documenting every interaction isn't just smart, it's necessary. Every email, every letter, every photo of my lawn before and after, those little things became shields, armor against arbitrary authority. I often tell people, they tried to control my lawn, but they couldn't control the law. And that's the lesson everyone needs to hear. It also taught me patience. I had to stay calm, plan carefully, and resist the urge to react emotionally to every petty letter and veiled threat. Fighting fire with facts isn't just more effective, it's a reminder that power isn't always physical. Sometimes it's legal, strategic, and, yes, beautifully subtle. For anyone watching this who's dealing with a similar situation, don't underestimate yourself. Don't assume a title or a rulebook gives someone the right to intimidate you. Stand firm. Document everything. Read the fine print. Know the law. And when you can, turn their rules into a tool rather than a trap. The yard behind me gleamed in the evening light, smooth stones and thriving cacti forming a quiet testament to resilience. It wasn't just a victory over an overreaching HOA, it was a reminder that common sense, courage, and preparation can shift the balance of power. Voiceover moment: cinematic, reflective, a touch of gravitas. They tried to control my lawn, but they couldn't control the law. And in that truth lies the real power. At the end of the day, this story isn't just about rocks or grass. It's about standing up, knowing your rights, and refusing to let bureaucracy dictate your life. Small rules can hide big power, but understanding them can turn the tables entirely. And that, I realized, was the most valuable lesson of all. The sun was just dipping below the horizon, casting golden light across the desert rock garden I'd fought so hard to create. Every stone, every cactus, every carefully placed plant glowed like it had been set there to tell a story, my story. I stepped onto the porch and let my gaze sweep across the yard. It wasn't just landscaping anymore. It was a monument to persistence, knowledge, and a little creative rebellion. A quiet triumph that didn't shout but spoke volumes. And that's the heart of it. Sometimes the battles we face aren't against people so much as systems, rules, regulations, titles, or letters written in intimidating fonts. But standing your ground, knowing your rights, and documenting everything can turn even the most oppressive rules into opportunities. So here's the takeaway, the advice I'd give anyone facing the same absurdity. Stand your ground. Know your rights. And when they try to dig up your peace, turn it into stone. Because in the end, it's not just about winning. It's about asserting your space, your voice, and your sanity in the face of unnecessary control. The camera pans slowly across the yard as the last rays of sunlight catch the smooth white stones, the spiky agave, and the tidy riverbed of rocks, a serene desert oasis in the middle of suburbia. The lights flicker on, small beacons against the twilight, a reminder that order, beauty, and law can coexist. And as I take a final sip of my coffee, letting the calm wash over me, I smile and deliver the cinematic punchline, the line that sums up months of conflict, research, strategy, and quiet victory. They wanted my grass gone, I gave them a garden they'll never forget. Fade out. The yard glimmers under the setting sun. Victory is quiet, legal, and utterly unforgettable.